What's up, people? It's a little dark. I don't know if you can see me. I can see myself. It's actually daytime. I should have the curtains open. I guess that'll make it a little better. But anyways, so back to it. I feel like I should tell a little bit about. I didn't actually tell. So I know I got into the trap and how I met this first guy who, sold to us, and we were smoking before we went to school. So to give a little bit because I don't want to give names out. So that I would say he was. We'll call him like the curly hair. We'll call him curls, I guess. So the curly hair dude, um, who sold us the first time. I remember when I first met him. I should give a little bit of how I met these guys before I went to the trap because I met them before. Um, going to the trap, I believe. So, anyways, so before me and my best friend started going out a lot, um, in the summer of '06, I remember before that summer, like I explained earlier, my brother he knew a lot of these guys from the south side, and they were the ones who were at the trap. Who were living in that trap. Um, and I have to give some how I met these guys because they're a big part of my story too. So at first they were more my brother's friends. I didn't really claim them. I didn't really look at them as friends. And so growing up in the neighborhood I grew up, just to give a little bit of details about that. So the gang I was around. Um, I'm from the harbor, and the harbor is different than the south side. So same gang, but different, you know, politics and ways of doing things and the way we look at things and how we interact, you know, with each other in our sets and, stuff like that. So we didn't really intermingle. When I was young, the two didn't intermingle at all. But the older I got, the more people I noticed were intermingling. I don't know if it was always like that and I just didn't pay attention, but from what I know, like I said, growing up, the older guys in my set would always bad talk these dudes. I don't know why. They were just brainwashing, honestly. So, the older guys in my set would just always talk bad about these dudes, like, oh, they're lame, they don't do this, they're whack and this and that. So I never wanted to go hang out with those dudes. I never thought to hang out with those guys because I was like, yo, if they're lame, why would I want to hang out with those guys? Yeah, they're a part of the same gang, but no, I don't want to hang around no lame. I don't trust lames. I thought, but these guys from the south side were far from lame, far from it. Like I said, these older guys, for some reason, I don't know what they saw or what they dealt with. Anyways, I'm just telling my side of the story. I don't like talking um, what's not the truth. If they didn't do the same as we did, I would tell you. But anyways, living in the projects, I remember, my brother, his room was upstairs, and the rooms in the projects were upstairs. They did have bedrooms on the first floor, but for some dumb reason, they put us in the house in one of those project places that the rooms were upstairs. So I stood on a bed downstairs. My mom couldn't carry me upstairs and put me in my in a room. Of course, I did have a room, but anyway, so uh, they would always go upstairs, to go hang out with my brother, and they were more my brother's friends. I never hung out with them before my accident, and when they would come, I don't ever say what up to them, because I thought they were lame, and I don't know if they said what up to me. It didn't really matter to me. I would just pay attention to the TV when these guys came in. My brother, me and my brother were always kind of the opposite of each other. So he did his own thing always, and I did my own thing. I did want to hang out with him when I was very young. Some brothers want to hang out with their older brother, but he would always be like, no, no, no. And some of his friends would try to make it happen, especially the friend that grew up with us and was with me the night I was injured. Anyway, so yeah, I remember these guys would come over and they would always go up and one of them though one day he comes and sits next to me and he goes, "Hey, do you smoke?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Why don't you ever, come up and smoke with us?" When he said that, I go, "Bro, do you know that I'm paralyzed? You know what I'm saying? Like, how can I go upstairs and just go smoke with you guys?" And he goes, and I could tell he got a little bit of offended. These guys are, you know, hood. Anyway, so he goes, "You know what I mean?" And I go, "No, I don't. I'm hood too. I have a little bit of hood mentality." And so being a smart ass, a smart aleck, my bad. Anyways, so he goes, um, would you want to smoke? And I was like, what? I ain't gonna lie, I want to smoke. I'm young and I can't smoke how I want. I'm 14 probably at the time if it's '06. So I'm like, man, I can't smoke. Like, I love smoking and I can't just smoke, of course. And this isn't the guy who had curly hair. This is another guy, a little short dude who lived at the trap. And because the guys who were coming over when I first moved into the projects were mostly the guys from the trap. And what's scary about that, and I didn't know that at the time, is um, the people that I lived in the projects, it's called West Calumet Projects. It's gone now, but these guys didn't like the guys from the South Side because when the people from the projects would go to the South Side, that's a different gang. So they would always game bang with each other. In school, they would game bang with each other. In high school, in high school, all the gangs went to school together. And so they would always beef with each other so that the guys from the projects didn't get along with the guys from the South Side. So they always told us, like, oh, man, like, when we first get moved there, we had to get permission. I'm pretty sure I explained that in another video. Or, we had to get okayed and stuff like that, if I remember correctly. And they told us like, the guys from the harbor, you guys from the harbor are okay, but those guys from the South Side, we don't like those dudes, and they better not come around here. If they do, we better not see them. They definitely better not cause no. None of you guys better not cause no, anything or. And we lived. If you guys knew, it's a gated community, and there's only while there was two ways to get in and out, but the other way there was like a that one wasn't always open, and it was like a still like not like a gate that kept that one closed, and the other way to get in, it was like a small entrance, and it was an opening to get in and an opening to get out, but both were small, and in the middle was a little booth where somebody sat in most times, letting people in and out and checking. I don't know if you live there or something. I can't remember correctly, but there was a booth for sure in the middle, and sometimes there would be people sitting in the booth. Anyways, so yeah, the guys from the South Side, I didn't know all this yet until I started going to school, and my friend, I had to be reminded, by the guy who got us the okay to live there, because one of my friends, he knew one of the guys, one of the big guys who lived in the projects. They were locked up together, and they had to talk. And like, hey, my little homie's about to live here. He's paralyzed, and this is where they're putting him. Is it okay? And is it good? And that's when the dude told us everything. So I remember, the dude asks me if I want to smoke, and I'm like, yeah, I would love to smoke. I smoke. And he goes, all right, I'm gonna go up there and smoke. And when it comes to me when it comes to if you were up there, you're hit. I'll bring it down to you. And I was like, what? You're gonna come all the way down here to pass me the blunt? Like, that's cool. And like that's not you're not that bad in my head. Like, damn. So, anyways, so he does every time it was my hit, he would come down and pass it, come down and pass it, and I was like, damn, that's cool. And the next time he came over, it was the same dude, same little short dude, and I remember the second time he came over. This time we greeted each other, and he goes, "Hey, you want to smoke? Like you want to smoke again, right?" And I was like, "Sure, bro, if you don't mind." Of course, I didn't have any money. I'm living off a disability check, and my mom got my disability check. I gave it. She was in charge of me. I wasn't 18 yet, so the disability money that was entitled to me, my mom had it in her name. So, and it wasn't a lot. So, we were living off of disability money, even though, thank goodness, we were living in the projects and it wasn't expensive in the projects. So, they charged you, I don't know how much. I know it was according to your income, and it still wasn't a lot because the projects is different than Section 8. So it wasn't a lot at all. And then everything else was on you, besides your rent and your heat and all that. And that wasn't, I think we paid like altogether 150 a month. And at that time, I probably got 550 back in '06 when we were living in the projects. Because like I explained to you guys in the very beginning, I was, we were jumping around. So it was probably around 550. Anyway, so in '06 in the projects, we're living there, and this dude asks me the second time, like, so you want to smoke, right? And I go, sure, bro, if you don't mind. And he goes, all right, but hey, I'm not bringing it up and down. And I'm like, so how am I going to smoke? And he goes, I'm going to carry you upstairs. And then that's when I was like, bro, there's a reason why I'm down here. You know what I mean? I don't go upstairs. Like, it's not just because I can't walk. It's just because I don't want to go up there. And and if you take me up there, it's not going to be cool. And then that's when he was like, bro, I don't care what you say or what anybody says. You know what I mean? If you want to go upstairs, you want to go upstairs and smoke? And I was like, bro, I want to smoke. Yeah. And he goes, that's what you need to say. And so, sure enough, he picks me up, doesn't ask nobody, and he takes me upstairs. And I, I get upstairs. I won't say what's said, and I'm getting an idea of these guys, and now I'm smoking with this dude, and I'm like, dang, this dude's cool. So, and the same thing with the curly hair guy. I remember his first time coming over. I guess I don't know if he came over with that other dude, because when I met him too, man, this dude was such a good guy. Like, he was so amazing. Like, I know these guys are from the streets, and if you knew who these guys really were, if you looked at these guys, if you looked them up, some of them went to jail for doing bad things. Some of them are still in jail for doing bad things. But these guys had, uh, I don't know how to say it, they had a good heart. Like, I know you wouldn't believe me again if you knew their history and what they did, but like, to their friends and to their family and stuff, they were amazing people. That's why I it's when people judge people like us, or like people like my friends, um, I'm like, do you judge people that I know it's way different? It's way different. It's not the same. Shouldn't compare. No disrespect, but I'm like, we were born in a bad area. This is what we were brainwashed to do. This is what we were brainwashed to know. Is to gangbang, to be gangbang, or not even sometimes. But when we meet, when most of us are friends and we all are on the same street, and this street is owned by or ran by a certain gang, and we agree with that, with the politics and the rules and the regulations of the gang, and all of our friends we already live on this block, and these other blocks have gangs and that are trying to bully us and stuff like that. And if you're not a part of something, sometimes you do get bullied, like when they know you're not a part of something, and that's why sometimes it's not I believe sometimes it's not a choice. I really feel sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes if you don't want to get bullied and you don't have a choice to move to a family member's house, or your mom or your parents don't want to give you up, like they dislike where they live, or I'm not saying this is my option, I'm just saying this is what happens. I feel like in certain people's lives, they don't want to game bang, but they don't have, where can they go? They can't move in with their grandparents. Their grandparents are doing what needs to be done for themselves. They can't afford it, or those who do have that options do that. I don't get the people that wanted to stay where I'm from and wanted to game bang. And then some people get brainwashed to wanting to keep doing it. Some people, it becomes a lifestyle. Some people love doing the thing, the game banging life. It, so, anyways, this guy with the curly hair, I remember his first time coming over before the summer. Um, and this is how I got introduced to these dudes, before I even went to the trap. And my first time, like I explained to you guys in the last video. And I remember sitting there and it was hot, and just looking at this big dude who I'm pretty sure I think they had leaders, or they had people that you know they for sure looked up to, who was very influential. And at this time, it was this big. I'm talking about big dude. He's laying on the bed and he's just, and I'm like, what? This don't look. And he had his shirt off, and all these young dudes are just, but not no Diddy stuff, far from it, anyways. But it's just because I'm like, yo, he's a grown ass man, or he looked grown, and these dudes were like, in their teens, and I know they're all getting money together and stuff like that. But I'm like, yo, bro, it just wasn't like, if I was grown, because he looked like he was at least, and I know this isn't old, but to me that's grown at our age. I'm only 14 at that time, so seeing he had to be like 25. So I'm like, why is this 25-year-old dude just chilling, with all of us? All the oldest dude at the trap at that time was maybe 17 that I know of. I think. That's how old he looked to me. But I mean, there were older dudes going to the trap, because the South Side had OGs too. So the OGs would go there and kick it with the youngsters, and get money with them, and bring them their stuff. And when they brought them, if they smoked, they would sit down and smoke. If not, they would sit there and play the video game for a little bit, or watch a movie. If they're watching a movie, chop it up, what's going on, type stuff, but they didn't kick it there as far as I know of, unless, of course, there were some nights where they would have the little parties and people would spend the night, and probably, let me shut up, because he probably did stay the night. It was probably a party that night, who knows. Anyway, so back to it. I remember when the dude with the curly hair came over, and he became somebody very influential, but at this time he was maybe 15, because if I'm not mistaken, he's probably a year and a half older than me, or two, maybe the most. So this guy comes over, and me and him became very close off top. But the first time me meeting him, besides the time my homie was like, "You ever been to the trap?" And I'm like, "What's the trap?" And I didn't know it was those guys who were coming to to our house and hanging out with my brother. And so they opened the door and they're like, "Little Joey," and I'm like, not it took me a second to recognize them, into, like, "Oh, you're the dude who I'm, carrying me upstairs to smoke." Anyways, so yeah, when the dude with the curly hair came over, same thing. He goes, "Hey man, you smoke, right?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Hey man, you want to hang out with us and smoke?" And I was like, "Sure." And so everything was based on smoking at this time. What can I do? I'm paralyzed. So, and just to give you an idea of how I met these guys again, and then I'll get back to the summer of '06. Uh, this is still '06 though. So, and yeah, and the dude with the curly hair, same thing. He carried me upstairs, and he had an older brother, and his older brother was very close with my brother. They were best friends, and he was his older brother was very influential. And when I mean influential, what I mean is like I could see the younger guys looked up to them. Where I'm from, we didn't have influential guys. Like I said, we didn't have leaders, or I'm not saying they had leaders, but I felt like they had people who were influential to them. That the younger guys, if these guys were to say something, they're looking up to them and stuff like that. I don't know if it's because in my set we knew that our older guys weren't all that what they cracked themselves up to be, because the way they would talk down on people, and were sometimes, because they were grimy, if you knew what the word grimy is. And they would acknowledge it sometimes, my older guys. And when they would acknowledge it, I'm like, why are you proud of being grimy? Like, and I know you guys are probably thinking I'm dumb, period, for being around a gang. But anyways, I know you guys are thinking like, why were you hanging around older guys who were grimy? Like I said, just what I said a little bit earlier, it's because when I realized a lot of my younger friends, not my younger friends, because I told my friends not to join, the guys who started taking care of me and started bringing me around, when I saw the way they seen how these guys were getting money and smoking weed, and, I think they thought that was cool. And even though I told them you can't trust these dudes, man, like we could trust each other, but you can't trust these older dudes. And so, anyways, and I'm gonna end it here quick soon, and then get back to the summer of '06. So, yeah, when I met the curly hair dude, same thing, man. These dudes from the trap were amazing. These young guys, because like I said, it was like 4 or 5 of them, and a few of them were actual blood. So that's why they were able to live down there, and it was an actual like little a house on below their house, because they had family who lived above, but the owner, the parent of the house above them, for some reason, she never went down there. And oh my gosh, I can only imagine if she went down there, but she never did. Anyway, so yeah, these dudes were cool guys, man. Like always chilling with, smoking with me, and chit chatting. And that's how I got to meet the guys from the south side slowly. First this short dude, then this curly hair dude. And when I went to the trap, like I said, with my best friend, and that's when I started meeting the curly hair dude's older brother, and the other short dude, his family that lived in the trap. And I started meeting their OGs, and yeah, and that's when I started, you know, getting my own opinions of the guys from the South Side, and being in the trap and seeing the things that they did and how they did it and the money they were getting. I remember being in the trap one time, and that's when I realized like, these dudes are just organized, because I remember, definitely gonna end it right here. I remember one day, I think I was there on a Friday. It was definitely a certain day, because I remember, you know, the guys who lived there and the guy who was making money with them. I remember they were like, okay, today's the day for us to count up to make sure that, we're making our quota, and that we're making more than last week. And if not, we need to talk about why, what needs to be done and what's going on and this, and that. And then I remember they went into the room and they tried to shut the door, but I could still see a little bit inside. And I remember all these guys, one by one. put their money on the bed and, counted it up, and, you know, of not one of them made less than the week before. So, and I was like, what the heck are they doing? And then that's when I was like, wow, they're organized, like they're counting how much money they made, and they're, making sure that they made the same amount last week, if not more. And if they made less, they're trying to figure out why, like these guys freaking selling out like it's a freaking store, you know what I mean? And they're checking their, like, hey man, did inventory go well? Like, is there a reason we're not making as much? You know what I mean? Like, anyways, so I'll get back to it. When I get back to it, because I know it's all different when I get a video, and life is hectic. So again, just telling my story because I think it's crazy, very crazy, especially being in a chair and seeing these things and living through it. And thank you, God, for helping me get through it and living through these things. But it's because if it wasn't for my mother and for these guys, because I'm gonna explain, because not only did my friends learn how to take care of me, and I know I'm explaining one by one who learned, first it was my best friend and his brother, because where I was left, and if you guys remember at the quinceañera, and then the little homie who was very outspoken, who my mom let stay there all the time, no matter what, and he was there for most of the summer of '06. And I should tell a few stories about him here soon. Um, but anyways, so yeah, it's crazy. I made it through it, and I just think it's crazy, and I just want to motivate one person, if anything, if I could save one person, motivate, move them here, that they were inspired to move out of where they're from. I don't know, paralyzed or not, a gang member or not, anybody, um, insecure, and I don't know, whatever the situation, the case is. People have always told me to get this out here, so I'm getting it out here. And thank you, anybody who's listening, and love you guys who are listening. And thank you, anybody who is. And see you guys next time.